forged through nationhood, and Nigerians still tend to think of themselves as Yorubas, Igbos, Hausas, Fulanis, Kanaris, Chiefs, Idomers, Nupes, Ijars, Edos, Urobo, and so on within the Nigerian state. Some of the ongoing calls for restructuring are motivated by the aim of finding geographical expressions for these socio-cultural identities. Although we can compel statehood by show of force, we cannot force true nationhood into existence. Relationship cannot be legislated. It can only be cultivated. Nationhood can be built only through good and equitable governance. Therefore, those asking for the opportunity to negotiate their existence within the Nigerian state based on their ethnic or cultural identities have a right to do so, as captured in international legal instruments such as the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, to which Nigeria is a signatory. However, these negotiations must be handled with decorum and all the sensitivity required so that the Rehoboams in the polity may not play into the hands of the Jeroboams and push the nation from bad to worse, as it happened to Israel of old. As for those calling for secession, they should bear in mind the fact that before the creation of the Nigerian state, there was no Yoruba nation, there was no Igbo nation, there was no Hausa nation, neither was there an Ijaw nation. We must not be misled by nostalgia for a spurious, harmonious past, or the myth of homogeneous ethnic groups that is far removed from reality. The area around the Niger was marked with unrest, continuous intergroup conflict, subjugation, enslavement, and oppression of the weaker by the stronger, until Nigeria provided the possibility for peaceful coexistence. Egbas will never forget what your people did to them. And all the civil wars in Yoruba land, if you call it back to mind, you know there was never a Yoruba nation once upon a time. For this, we must appreciate the Nigerian state. We must celebrate our Nigerianness, and we must gravitate towards strengthening our nationhood rather than cursing our blessings. Thank you. Be that as it may, there is no doubt in my mind that the current structure cannot hold the greatness that awaits the nation, but it could hinder it. The demand, however, should not be for secession. The question should be, how best do we organize ourselves for equitable, peaceful, and productive coexistence? This takes me to a position on the pathway to a stable and prosperous Nigeria. I'd like to call this last segment Pathway to a New Nigeria. I can hear your amen. Amen. Each of the schools of thought on restructuring reminds one of the story. I am an advocate of progressive and pragmatic restructuring. Progressive because ours is a long-term approach, and pragmatic because the interests of every segment of the country are taken into consideration. It is to this end that we reiterate and even expand the scope of our call for the creation of a presidential commission for national reconciliation, reintegration, and restructuring by the president through an executive order in full consultation with the Council of State and the National Assembly. Mr. President should not just tell the National Assembly to debate it, but an executive order in consultation with the Council of State and National Assembly should set up or create a presidential commission for national reconciliation, reintegration, and restructuring. The presidential commission should be given the mandate and the powers to facilitate within 10 years the evolution of a functional and acceptable geopolitical structure subject to constitutional provisions. You can only change law by law, not by force. The Presidential Commission should be given the mandate and the powers to facilitate within 10 years the evolution of a functional and acceptable geopolitical structure subject to constitutional provisions while the 1999 Constitution is progressively amended. If it is good and standing by itself, nobody will amend it. It's subject to amendment, and will continue to do that until we put it in such a way that will become a blessing, not a curse to the nation. This commission shall undertake a geo-economic, two parts, a geo-economic and geo-social part to a geopolitical restructuring. We are asking for a geopolitical restructuring that will embrace two major segments. One, a geo-economic, and two, a geo-social frameworks, making the fault lines, I beg your pardon, geo-economic frameworks, mending geo-social fault lines, and attaining geopolitical climax. Let me start with geo-economic frameworks. What do we mean by creating one? The Nigerian economy is clearly regional in structure. Let me stop and ask you a question. In the days of the region, which region had cocoa boom? I can't hear you. Where did you find granite pyramid and heights and steam? Where did you find palm oil? Where do you find rubber plantation? You can see from there, the Nigerian economy is clearly regional in structure, with comparative advantages defined by climate, geology, biogeography, population, and culture. It is why in the era of the regions, even though agriculture and mineral production were the mainstays of the economy, there were areas of specialization that you have just confirmed. The 6 geopolitical zones not only roughly reflect 6 socio-cultural zones, but also mirror 6 geo-economic zones that can be deliberately cultivated over a period of about 10 years, within which political structures can be designed. The 10-year window is meant to cater for the concerns of parts of the country where the notion of restructuring is opposed, mainly due to perceived economic disadvantages. Within the 10-year period, the 6 zones will have been aided to develop areas of comparative advantage. Therefore, in the interest of sustainable economic development over the next 10 years, we propose the following 7-point agenda. A, the federal government will progressively devolve powers to the existing 36 states, which will themselves progressively evolve into a zonal arrangement. To facilitate this, we propose the creation of 6 zonal commissions to be headed by zonal commissioners appointed from each zone to work with the 36 state governors to facilitate integration. These zonal commissioners will be charged with a mandate to map out the economic potential or strength of each zone, design or update, as the case may be, a zonal economic master plan, and coordinate federal and state efforts towards transitioning into zonal economies within 10 years, thereby harnessing the comparative resources of each zone to achieve globally competitive economics of scale and scope. Agenda B, instituting a social bond to fund the transition to zonal economics, thereby attracting local and international investment to the possibilities of vibrant zonal economic clusters. So if a man is going to Southwest, he wants to know what are the things he can invest in. If he desires to go to the Northeast, he wants to know what are there that attracts his investment. And those are the things we are going to emphasize and highlight and build up so that each zone can compete globally, though local. It's called a global vision. Agenda 3, or C. Within the financing framework, instituting a 5-part transitional zonal economic fund focused on the key sectors with unique expressions in each of the 6 geopolitical zones, including human capacity development. If your region knows what you are good in, you begin to raise people who are brilliant in that field, send them to school, train them so that they can continue to add value to economy in that place and not raise people who are just consumers. The Zonal Economic Fund will focus on human capacity development, extractive minerals, agriculture, industrialization, creative and cultural development. D. A progressive increase in percentage of funds from mineral extraction accruing to the state from which it originates. And good news, there's no single state in Nigeria without its own mineral resource. Not a single one. A progressive increase in percentage of funds from mineral extraction accruing to the state from which it originates, such that by the 10th year, either by derivation or by partial resource control, subject to constitutional provisions, 50% of revenue will be returned or retained in the zone of origin as it was at independence and the First Republic. E. Consequently, a progressive shrinking of the distributable pool. I'm laughing because our governors only major in carrying their bowl to Abuja to beg every month. Consequently, a progressive shrinking of the distributable pool account over 10 years based on recommendations by the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission in line with the restructuring thrust. F. Aside the Transitional Economic Fund, the creation of a specially internally generated revenue grant aimed at rewarding the efforts of the states in each zone at generating internal revenue as against compensating non-viable states for economic laziness. This grant will be in the form of counterpart funding. It's like, oh, any state, if you raise as much as this development thrust, will thus be managed by the federal government in conjunction with the zonal commissions and the state governments towards ensuring seamless linkage. Number 2, the second way to achieve what we want to achieve, mending geosocial fault lines. While the economic component of the restructuring agenda is being implemented, the geosocial component, which calls for a resolution of the interzonal and intrazonal aspects of the Nigerian question, should be immediately activated. Never again after those 10 years will Nigeria bother himself as to state of origin. It will be state of residence. There will be no settlers, there will be no indigents. We will all be Nigerians, free to live in any part of the country. This will entail harnessing the collective strengths of statesmen and nation builders across the nation to reconcile historical and current grievances and to reintegrate the diverse components of our nation into united nationhood. The details of this component are beyond the scope of this address, but they are contained in the framework for a presidential commission for national reconciliation, reintegration and restructuring submitted to Mr. President 2 months into his administration. Number 3, attaining a geopolitical climax. The climax of the work of the Presidential Commission will be to codify the geo-economic and geosocial outcomes and facilitate their evolution into vibrant geopolitical zones as federating units, each with rich sociocultural expressions and viable world-class economic clusters, all knit together by a strong federal government. The geopolitical zones will have the power to organize the constituent states and local governments as districts and counties based on the models created by the geoeconomic and geosocial aspects of the process. By the 10th year, the codified outcomes will be presented to the President, who in conjunction with the National Assembly, we have within the 10-year period championed the necessary constitutional amendments for progressive development of good governance, including allowing for a referendum in which the Nigerian people will eventually adopt the framework as a new constitution for a new Nigeria, so that we can truly say, we, the people of Nigeria, have deemed it fit to give ourselves a constitution. If you think like me, as I expect you will, you'll be wondering in your mind, this 10-year period, how do you sustain it? What's going to happen if the one who initiates it leaves office? Sustainability. The proposed 10-year transitional window is expected to kick in from 2018 to 2028. I understand the holders of public office at all levels of government to demonstrate the desired political will, drawing lessons not only from the Abuja story, but also from more recent policy transitional success stories, including the Integrated Payroll and Personal Information System, IPs, the Government Integrated Financial Management Information System, GIVMIS, and the Treasury Single Account, TSA, which were enacted by the preceding administration but have been implemented by the current government. Many people think the TSA was started by President Buhari. No. It was started by Jonathan, and they have continued. We expect that continuity in respect of this